All right, here we go. Thank you, everybody. This Thursday, March 20th, 2025 meeting of the Budget Committee is now called to order. Ms. Henderson, will you please call the roll?
Buck,
Here.
Afghan,
Here.
Mamboop,
Here.
Corrigan, Rapp, Burdick,
Here.
Wendland,
Here.
Zeller,
Here.
Rebello,
Here.
Salehi, Shea, Rye, Love, here, and Lander.
All right, thank you, Ms. Henderson, for calling the roll. So the first thing that we need to do to begin this cycle of the budget process is we need to select both the Budget Committee Chair and a Vice Chair. Is there a motion to nominate for Chair?
I move that we nominate, or I move to nominate Elizabeth Zeller as chair.
And thank you, Councilor Wendland, for seconding Mayor Buck's motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes, and thank you very much to
Thank you.
the committee. Is there a motion to nominate someone as vice chair?
I move to nominate Jamie Rye as vice chair.
So it has been moved by Mayor Buck and seconded by Councilor Wendland. All those in favor, say aye, please.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes, and thank you, Ms. Rye. Sure. We welcome you.
Never sit next to the chair.
Next is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting. They were sent out again this afternoon. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to read them. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Councilor Massen. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Afghan. Although, any...
Point of order, I don't know, don't you have to be at the meeting to approve or not? You don't
Well,
have to
this
be?
is a parliamentary question, and our parliamentarian is not here. Oh, you're saying that since you weren't present at the meeting?
Right.
David Powell.
Do you know the
always
answer?
said
Oh,
it did not
yes.
matter.
I don't think it does matter for
But I
minutes.
read, you are right, because.
Doesn't matter? Okay, never mind.
No, it does, maybe.
If we're wrong, we'll tell you next time after you've already done the damage.
Were there any corrections or points of discussion before we vote? Hearing none, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? And the minutes have been approved, so thank you very much. So next, I'll just briefly talk about the ground rules for the Budget Committee for the budget session, talk about the schedule and the agenda for tonight's meeting. So just in terms of the Budget Committee, as I think everyone knows, this is the public involvement vehicle for the city's budgeting process. And our role is to review, to discuss, and ultimately approve the proposed budget as presented by the city manager. And upon the Budget Committee approving, then which approves the budget, sets the tax rate or amount, sets the tax rate for property taxes, and then it goes to, then the budget will have been approved. Did you have something you wanted to add?
I'll do it later.
Okay. All right. Always feel free to jump in. Sorry. City Manager Bennett. So we will begin at 6, and the goal is to end by 9 o'clock, and it seems like the past couple of years we've been able to do that. We will have public comment. I don't think we have much in the way of public comment today, but I anticipate that we will next time quite a bit. So there will be opportunities for people at the beginning and end of each meeting with a 3-minute time limit, depending, and I do plan to hold to that, particularly as I do anticipate we will have quite a bit of public comment. Just maybe a couple other things to cover. Is no deliberations outside of the Budget Committee meetings. So this is the place where we talk about the budget, and we should not be doing that outside of these meetings. The passing vote is a majority of the entire committee, which is 8. And then really would ask that the committee focus on the big items. That's our role, is not to necessarily go down to the $10,000 level or how much costs of pencils or postage, but really at the big picture level. And then we will be making a call once people have the budget for questions. It's really helpful for staff to have those in advance so they can prepare and even prepare answers and have those out to the committee, so that we can make the best use of our time. With that, any questions on that? All right, and with that, we have the next meetings scheduled. Our next meeting will be April 23rd, which is the first time we will be looking at the budget. We do have a number of extra meetings scheduled if needed, but we will determine that after the 23rd. And there will be, at minimum, one final meeting where we will vote. All right. Any questions, comments on that? Hearing none, is public comment, but I don't see any public to comment. So I'm going to assume we'll move forward and turn it over to City Manager Bennett for the council goals and budgeting priorities.
Thank you, Chair Zeller. I appreciate that very much. First of all, thank you all for being willing to serve on the Budget Committee. Not only is it required that we have a Budget Committee, but it's also really helpful, as Chair Zeller mentioned, to make sure that there's scrutiny on the budget by folks who otherwise are not involved, if that makes sense. Folks from the community and the public, making sure that they're taking a look at our proposed spending plan and making sure it sort of matches what you think the objectives and goals of the city are going to be. So look forward to your deliberation. I think the last budget, we had very few changes, so we'll see how it goes. You guys, of course, are entitled to amend the budget, but hopefully we'll present something that you think is in alignment with the City Council's goals and also is going to meet the community's needs. So before I start, let me just say I think of the budget as a spending plan. The finance directors always kind of cringe when the city managers say what I'm about to say. I think of it as a spending plan to implement the council's policy agenda. Now, finance directors always rightly point out to me that it itself is a policy document, and that is absolutely true. But as someone who actually is responsible for translating the council's vision, goals, and objectives into action, for me, the budget is a critical tool in that. So I'm going to cover the 2025 City Council goals, and councilors, please chime in as appropriate. And then I'm going to talk about how we build the budget here in Lake Oswego, because it's slightly different than is done in other cities around us. And I did this in reverse order 2 years ago, so if it sort of seems familiar, but it doesn't seem quite right, that's why. Okay, so can we go to the next slide, please? I get to drive myself? No. Okay. After I get done talking, Sean will go over the 6-year financial forecast, and then we'll talk about the municipal grant process. Okay. The City Council has set 8 strategic goals, and underneath that, they adopt initiatives. And initiatives, they come, Councilor Afghan challenged me this year to sort of make sure I was very clear on what it is. But for me, an initiative is a project or a program or policy work that's probably going to take between 12 and 24 months to execute. Oftentimes, they take longer. Sometimes they come in phases. But again, the city council's goals, what it is they have come together as a group, as an elected body to accomplish, are the foundation of where we allocate, and you'll see my iceberg in a little while, but where we allocate the discretionary revenue that doesn't go into the ordinary day-to-day activities, and where the council chooses to allocate their time. And council time is actually the most precious resource the city has. And so we want to make sure that we have the budget pointed in that same direction. If the council wants to spend their time on an issue or a project, we want to make sure we've allocated the financial resources to that project or program or activity so that we can support their work on it. So the first of their 8 goals is to ensure a safe, secure, and prepared community. That's been something along those lines has been a city council goal for at least 5 or 6 years. And there are 2 council initiatives that have been adopted as part of that. The first is the goal, again, a continuation of a goal we've had the last 2 years, to work really hard to increase the preparedness of Lake Oswego residents. Because we know that when a really big disaster hits, there's a limitation on what folks can get from the city itself or from other government entities. And so it's really incumbent on all of us as individuals to be as prepared as we can be in our own homes, but especially seniors and people with disabilities who are especially vulnerable to not being able to access services in the event of disaster. Again, there's an asterisk here, which just tells you that it's been a council goal for a couple of years. You will see specific activities in the budget when you see it that are pointed at implementing this particular goal. The second goal is to redefine the 50-plus initiative is to redefine the 50-plus advisory board as a community health and resiliency advisory board. This will actually not have a huge budget implication in the upcoming budget, but may in future years as we move to whatever the next phase of this work happens to be. The second of the 8 strategic goals is to support business investment and job creation in Lake Oswego. This has also been a goal of the councils for quite a few years, and there's quite a huge body of work here. The first is around the North Anchor redevelopment project. Last year we were pretty specific. This year we were a little bit more general, recognizing what's happening to the real estate financial market in our nation and state. This is probably not as well reflected in the budget in terms of like being able to clearly identify it, but we'll talk about that when we get to the urban renewal portion of the budget. The next is to begin the update of the Foothills District Plan and continue to evaluate Lake Grove Urban Renewal Plan. For Foothills, you will clearly see a large grant that we received from Metro in the proposed budget and the associated work that goes along with it. The next one is to elevate and update the 2022 Economic Development and Development Strategy. There's something grammatically not right with that sentence, sorry about that. And Resource Plan. We've had a 3-year pilot program with the Chamber of Commerce to implement part of our 2022 strategy. So in addition to evaluating our success in implementing the strategy, we're also going to be evaluating the role of the Chamber in helping us implement that. You will see some placeholder funding for the Chamber of Commerce in the proposed budget. And then the last one is to collaborate with the Chamber of Commerce and other community partners to promote Lake Oswego as a destination. It's really a visitor promotion strategy to support our shopping, dining, and other sort of events that happen in the community. We have allocated some funding in the proposed budget for this, but the first phase of this project is scoping, so it may or may not be the right amount. We did the best we could. Others have also done that work. The third goal is to attract and support a diverse population where all people have civic agency, the opportunity to thrive, and to have equitable access to city services. And the major initiative under this is to prepare a status report on our 2022 DEI task force recommendations. What have we actually successfully implemented? What's still in progress? And what do we think, after reflecting on the plan, we don't have the capacity to actually do as a city organization? And then to recommend a process to update. I think that maybe you shouldn't say strategy, but to update the recommendations report. This, we do have staff allocated to this particular work, and there is some consulting resources available to help us implement it. And I'll talk much more about this when I actually present them. I guess I should have started by saying, remember the budget process has 3 phases. The first one is the one we're in now, which is that the budget officer proposes a budget. So, and you guys don't actually get to talk about the actual numbers until I actually deliver the proposed budget to you, which will happen 7 days before your next meeting. Then you guys enter your deliberations, which is where the budget gets approved, and then it goes to the council at the very end where it gets adopted. So it's a 3-phase process. We're in that first phase. It's kind of frustrating because I can't talk to you about numbers and you can't ask me about numbers, but here we go. The next of the City Council's strategic goals is to combat climate change and strengthen the community's resilience to climate impacts. There are 3 initiatives under there, all of which do appear in the budget. The first, or will appear in the budget when you see it. The first is to adopt a sustainable buildings policy for city buildings and for construction and also remodeling and operation. The second is to implement the actions of the 2024 Urban and Community Forestry Plan. This again has been a council goal. Actually, this is the 3rd phase of a 3-part council initiative that started with the urban and community, the State of the Urban Forest Report, and then moved into the Urban and Community Forestry Plan, which we completed last year, and now is moving into specific update to the tree code. And then last but not least is to develop a plan for a phase out of gas-powered lawn equipment. And the idea is that we should be ready well, the plan has to be in place within 2 years. What the elements of the plan are TBD, but part of this is to take advantage of the fact that the city of Portland is already doing that, and they probably have the largest market share of people who use commercial yard care services, and so it doesn't make sense for the city to get ahead of what's happening in the larger market. Councilors can weigh in on that. I probably said it wrong, but I think that's the goal. The next one, and he's let me drive, so I have to remember to do it. I think of as our goal, it's really about everything else. It's really about city operations. So the idea, the goal is to strengthen public trust through continuous improvement processes, customer service, infrastructure investments, and fiscal stewardship. And this is actually the Budget Committee's actual strategic goal, right? This is where you all fit in, is making sure we're being thoughtful stewards of the public resources. Again, there's 4 initiatives under this. The first one is, actually, it's good for us to talk about this now because it will come up when you see the proposed budget. The first one is a several-year council goal to collaborate with the City of Portland to replace our existing wastewater treatment plant. Those of you who were on the Budget Committee 2 years ago, remember we had a discussion about whether this should appear in the budget or not. Strategically, you will see we have not placed it in the budget, but we have, when you see the budget, you'll see that we've flagged it as a budget note, and the real reason is we don't know what the dollar amount will be, and we don't necessarily want to advertise in the budget to the vendor we're working with what the dollar amount will be. So we want to get the best bid on behalf of the city, the most competitive bid that we're capable of. If we put a number in the budget, then they know what we think. The next initiative is this is the second year we've had this, which is a strategy for an all-ages community center, preferably on the west side of town, that would not only include event and meeting spaces, recreation spaces, but might also include a library. And I think you all know the school district's in the conversation with the community about a school bond that will be probably going to the voters in November of this year. And depending on what happens with that bond, there may be an opportunity to collaborate with them to build this project. This project will probably not begin to roll out, though, until after the November election, because we won't know what our needs are in terms of identifying properties until after the November election. Last year, the council launched a study. Actually, I know that we had at least one member of the Budget Committee on that committee to examine whether we needed to replace the South Shore Fire Station. They concluded that we do, and so the council's goal is really to take the next steps in terms of conversing with the community about what it would mean to replace the South Shore Fire Station. You will see the community engagement process portion in the budget. You will not see an anticipated GEO bond in the budget when it comes. So we are still trying to, well, anyway, once again, too, we don't want to put a dollar amount in there until we have a more accurate dollar amount. And then a new council goal, our initiative, the last one, is to adopt and implement a city communications plan to increase informed participation in city decisions and programs and activities. This is something that's going to appear throughout the budget. You're going to see this in a lot of different places. And in fact, if you want to ask when you see the proposed budget, where does this show up? It's going to show up in IT. It'll show up in the city manager's office. It'll show up in the library. It's going to show up in a lot of places because a lot of folks have to be involved to accomplish this particular council initiative. The next one is another council goal we've had for several years, invest in Lake Oswego's high-quality parks, natural areas, and recreational amenities. I think you all know that in the last budget, we had a major emphasis and a pretty significant spending priorities of finishing the major capital projects that had been started during as a result of the bond that passed in the community in 2019. So we actually, if you will recall, we allocated money that normally had been transferred to the street fund to finishing the skate park and to finishing the Lake Oswego Recreation and Aquatic Center. We've basically spent all those 2019 bond dollars once the LORAC opens, hopefully later next month. Not hopefully, it will open later next month. And the Parks Department has been on a process to update their master planning, their long-range master plan. And so the council's initiative really is to adopt that plan, but also to begin implementing it. So when we talk about the capital plan for parks, you'll see there's not a lot of investments in the first year because the first phase of implementing the parks plan will be identifying future park capital projects. There'll be some, you'll see some parks capital, but it won't be nearly as extensive as it has been in the last couple of budget cycles. You'll see that we have focused more on operating the new facilities than on building new ones. The next to last council goal is to improve transportation connections, mobility, and safety for all travelers and all types of trips. The council's focus has been on both of these initiatives for a couple of years. The first is to continue to make the streets safer for pedestrians. The council passed increase in the street maintenance fee 3 years ago, 4 years ago, something in that neighborhood. And that's gone to capital projects to improve our access to schools throughout. It generates around $2.5 million a year. I want to say $5 million or so a biennium. So that's the kind of scale those projects are at. It will take us 100 years to build all the pathways identified in our master plan at the current rate, but it's still better than not building them. And then the next one is to adopt a 20 is plenty speed program for residential streets. That will show up in the budget as well. Yeah, because we'll have to put up new signs and a bunch of other stuff. So. Oh, and then the last council goal is to plan for a change in growth with a focus on enhancing the community's quality of life and sense of place. I think you all probably know that the city has been working very hard to implement a series of state mandates around housing since 2019, and these are the next phases of our implementation work. The first one is a doozy, probably a multi-year process to begin a comprehensive review of our development code and actually all our entire development process, to identify places where we can either improve the code or streamline our processes to accelerate not only the production of housing, but all kinds of construction in Lake Oswego. And then the second part is to implement some of the shorter-term strategies in the housing production strategy, including some work around rezoning, some work around potential tax exemption programs, and adopting a fair housing policy. The fair housing policy won't take us very long, but some of these other projects will take quite a bit of time. So you'll see long-range planning staff and consulting dollars directed towards these two council initiatives. Okay, before I talk about how we build the budget, anybody have any questions about council goals? These really do drive our spending priorities. And so sometimes when we have to make choices, this is the touchstone we use. We go back and say, all right, we've got to make this choice. Does this choice move us closer to or further away from actually achieving the council's strategic goals and their high priority projects? And that's really what my next slide talks about, which is the budget implements policy. Again, I say this all the time. The budget is a spending plan to implement our goals for city programs, activities, projects. The things that we want to accomplish in the community is implemented by making sure we've allocated resources to it. All right. I love this slide, but not everybody loves this slide. I also have an airplane slide I sometimes show, and people like that one or hate it too. Okay, so now about how we build the budget in Lake Oswego. First of all, we use a biennial budget. Not every jurisdiction in Oregon, I would say probably about a quarter of cities in Oregon actually use a biennial budget. Most cities adopt an annual budget, but it really works in our city for a couple reasons. First of all, our revenues, especially in our general fund, are incredibly stable and predictable. The vast majority of the revenue in the general fund is property tax. Property tax grows reliably between 3% and 3.7% every single year. And so unlike other communities in Oregon that have a higher proportion of their revenues that are market volatile, so for example, I worked in a community where 20% of the general fund was lodging tax. And so they were highly tied to whatever was happening in the economy. We don't have that situation. And so we're able to look out 2 years and really anticipate what our general fund resources are. And the general fund, other than the capital improvement plan, the general fund's really where the action is, right? It's really where the fun stuff that we all care about. That's where police, that's where fire, that's where parks, that's where our library, that's where they show up. The other thing is most of what we do is very predictable. Like, as much as sometimes it feels like we focus on only the hot button issues that are going on in our community, really, we sweep the streets 365 days. Well, no, sometimes we take weekends off. But we patrol, we respond to 911 calls, we check out materials at the library, we mow the parks at it's the same activity every year. And so it's really important for us as a community to focus on that stuff that's above the water, because that's where we're really influencing the direction of the community. We'd like to do financial planning in the off year. We had a conversation with you guys last year about sort of what we saw as long-term trends. I know it didn't satisfy everybody, but I think that's the benefit of a biennial budget is that we don't spend all of our time. I used to show a hamster wheel, but I've decided that's slightly sarcastic, and I'm trying to be slightly less sarcastic. But an annual budget process for a community where our financial, both the expenditure side and the resource side are so predictable is really not an efficient use of government resources or public resources. The other thing we do that's different here than a lot, and I would say this is very rare. If I told you only a quarter of governments in Oregon do biennial budgets, I would tell you that there may be 4 other jurisdictions in Oregon that do this. But we treat our general fund departments like mini enterprises. So I think you all know that our enterprise activities, you can't, if money is generated by the water fund, I can't take water fund money and spend it anyplace else. And so they don't ever have to worry that their resources are going to be taken away and given to someone else. So they have no use it or lose it impulse. And so my predecessor, with all respect to him, said, how do we create that kind of attitude? Because I think we all have worked in organizations or heard of organizations, and I have worked in organizations where the 15th of June comes and some department still has budget left, and they're going to try to spend it all in the last 2 weeks because they don't want to give it back to the finance director and city manager to spend in the following year. So what we do here is we allocate to general fund departments a dollar amount for them to build their budget around at the beginning of the process, as opposed to asking them to give us a wish list and then me playing Santa Claus in the process of deciding who gets the best toys. We say, this is how much you're gonna get. You have to balance. Now, I will say that that process is a little bit of a dance because we do have to occasionally adjust the allocation to if there's been new work added by council, or if there's some state-funded mandate, or if there's some other cost pressure in the department that the director really doesn't have control over. But in general, then we ask the department to balance the budget. They get to keep their unspent funds. Now, once they keep them, they can only spend them on one-time things. So if you have a savings in a department, you can't use it to hire staff or pay for ongoing expenses, but you can use it. So for example, if you need a piece of equipment that you need to replace body cameras, although that's a bad example because we're going to fund that outside. You need to replace the elevator at the library. You're going to use your unspent money to do that elevator replacement. So it creates an incentive for them actually to save money right? Without Sean or I having to make an announcement on June 1st that they can't spend like crazy. Okay. I will say the benefits of this aren't strictly financial, although they are financial. The organizational benefit to the community is huge. Every place else I've ever worked, department heads worked great together as a team until they get to the budget process, and then they don't collaborate very well. Here, we collaborate really well together for 12 months out of the year. So this is how it looks. This is probably in 2020, this is probably the actual in
17.
yeah. This, I think of
changed
it looks like a syringe a little bit, or maybe it looks like a piece of plumbing that I don't understand. But so you have the general revenues come in largely, as I say, largely property taxes, and then we allocate them. We also let departments keep the revenue they generate for themselves. So say, for example, in parks, all of the recreation, yeah, it's tiny. All the recreation classes that they have, they get to keep all the revenue from that. It'll get bigger because we're going to open the LORAC and they'll have more revenue. Fire department, those are like alarm fees and things like that, right? No, those are the districts we provide services to.
Yeah, it's like a couple $1 million.
They provide services to Birds Hill and Lake Grove, and there's another one, Alto Park. And so they get real revenue from those. It's actually substantial. All right. And you can see the police and fire are by far the largest departments. Parks is also pretty large in terms of the allocation they get from the general fund. And then you get to city council, it's not very much money. So sometimes you'll see a percentage adjustment. Actually, you'll see this in the budget message, I guarantee it. A percentage adjustment to the city council's budget looks huge because it's like, 17%, but it's actually like $11. I think it's a little more than that, but anyway. So why does this work? First of all, it works because the policy decisions are made up front. I just told you we use the policy decisions made by the council to drive how we do this allocation process. It's transparent. You know exactly how much of the general fund is going to each one department. Again, the benefit of no interdepartmental competition. This is my personal favorite. I just love it. You don't have the impulse to buy stuff you don't need. And I don't have to be Santa Claus, which is really good for morale and for me. Although every once in a while I'm sad about it, but not very. And then they don't have the incentive. Every place else I've ever worked, there's a built-in incentive to put more money into something just because that's your contingency. Is the extra money you allocated to professional services. And so money gets hidden in the budget. It's hidden in plain sight, but it's still hard for the budget committee or the budget officer to find. And then last but not least, we also use the same policy approach for the capital improvement plan. Capital obviously is the big money, and I would expect if you're going to get public comment, most of the public comment you're going to get is probably about folks who have a very particular capital project that they like to make sure that we fund. We use master plans. All of our systems have master plans to drive how we do capital planning, but then we marry it up with council goals. So for example, in the street fund, probably the place where folks want to talk the most is about which streets are being paved. The prior council had a very clear articulated goal around pavement quality, and that really drove most of our decisions in terms of our recommendations. This council's priority has been around pathways, and it's not that we've given up on pavement quality, so no one should walk away thinking I said that. It's because we still do deeply care about if we maintain our streets, it's a lot cheaper than if we let them fall into disrepair. But if we have to choose, this is where if we have to, like this project A or project B, we use the council goals to drive that choice. Okay. All right, that's all I have before I turn it over. Oh, no. I thought you might want a sneak peek. Here's what we're seeing so far. First of all, city's in a really strong financial position. I tell people that one of the best things about this city is not only is our revenue stable, but our past practices in terms of adherence to financial policies is also really awesome. So we have contingency policies, we have reserve policies, we have ending fund balance policies, and we fund them first. And the past councils and past budget committees have supported that, and that has meant that we have not spent one-time money on ongoing things. So we have not dug a hole for ourselves. Okay. And when I go to, I was just been at a city manager conference, and a lot of our cities and counties around us are having financial studies. I just keep this part really, really quiet. I'd never talk about this one outside of Lake Oswego. Again, capital and materials and spending will implement council goals. It's going to be fairly articulated. You will see the impact of bringing on the Lake Oswego Recreation and Aquatic Center in the budget. We have trued up the FTE count, especially for on-call staff. We kind of had a spitball number we used 2 years ago, and after Melissa did the actual math about the number of hours we have to cover with on-call staff, it's a bigger number, and so you'll see that. We still have sufficient revenues to cover the operations, but when I saw the personnel number, I took a breath, and I suspect many of you might as well. We have very stable revenues in the general fund. I don't even know how to say this as many times as that. We have very stable revenues. We are completely insulated from the economy right now in the general fund. Some departments have faced, the next bullet, notable personnel cost increases. Some departments, and I would say some of that is due to inflation and labor agreements. Some of that is due to PERS increases. We're going to get a substantial health insurance premium increase this time around. But the other thing that's happened in the last 2 years in particular is we've had a lot of long tenured staff retire or leave, and they've been replaced by folks who are lower on the salary schedule. And while you might think that's great, they get a step increase for 5 or 6 years. And so the year-over-year increase in salary costs in departments where we've had substantial replacement of longer tenured employees with newer employees, you'll see substantial year-over-year increases. Inflation is more of a factor for personnel, but less of a factor for capital. You remember we talked a couple of years ago about how we were seeing 18-19% increases in capital costs. However, I will say I wrote this slide without thinking about tariffs on steel or lumber. And I don't know. I don't know. And then we also, here's the bad news for homeowners. Getting a mortgage has been a lot more expensive over the last 2 years. Here's the good news for the city. We had a lot of investment, unbudgeted investment income over the last 2 years, but we're going to treat that as one-time revenue, not as something that we can count on forever and ever. So those are what I would say when I want you to think about the budget. I want you to think, first of all, we're in a good spot. We need to keep being in a good spot by continuing to adhere to those past practices and policies. And the places where we should be having some concern are around those departments where we have employees that, I joke about this. I was hearing about the silver tsunami 20 years ago, which was going to be the mass retirement of the baby boomers from public service. Turns out they're pretty addicted to public service. We're now seeing it. It's now coming. And so as those longer tenured employees who are at the top of the range are retired, you're going to see higher year-over-year growth. Okay. Now I'm going to turn it over to Sean, unless you have questions for me.
Would it be possible to get these slides sent out?
Absolutely.
They're great reference. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening. Just going to pull up Excel. So you've probably seen this 10 months ago because we did the same 6-year forecast, updated numbers. It pretty much looks the same.
You're waiting for Excel to open.
Yeah.
You have to close the PowerPoint. Oh, beautiful.
Want me to close it? I minimized it, but there's 3 of them. Okay, sorry. So basically, this is just for the general fund. It focuses on the operating revenues and the operating expenditures. Up here in this part of the graph, it's really just talking about the different kind of inflation that we're using for the different items over here. The biggest part of this whole projection is this right here, this projected department revenue and expenditure. It's basically showing all the different departments, and then do we have a little bit isn't allocated at the end that we can still allocate out in 6 years. So it's basically telling us, given even these factors up here of PERS costs going up over the years, and I was pretty conservative. We have 2.5 percentage points, so it goes from 26% to 28.5, but it's rounding it. I use that same 2.5 for every biennium after that to be pretty conservative. Anyways, what I was saying is that given it that we'll be fine. It's getting close, that there's only like, say, $400,000 left that isn't allocated out to the different departments, but that we're still in the positive.
That's 6 years from now, Sean.
Yeah, at 6 years. This is the final year. Like I said, this is the final year. Let's see. What else was I going to say? Then right here, we can change how these factors are for low, medium, and high. And these factors will go through and change it. So let's go with inflation, because this is the one that really will change everything. So if inflation goes up and we make that one high, it makes it completely upside down to where the final year, we have $76 million worth of expenditures and only almost $75 million worth of revenues. So we're a little upside down. The rest of them really don't affect that at all. I mean, if I make the state shared revenue higher, make franchise fees lower, it doesn't really change. So I guess my point is it's very stable, like Martha was saying, extremely stable. Let's see, what else? This is basically showing our revenue, how it's started in 2014, how it's gone up over time, and then given the different factors on that last tab, high, medium, or low, this is what we can see our revenue is doing. If things really shoot up and we have a lot of growth, then it goes up there. If we have low growth down there, but average growth of, let's say, 5%, or, I guess on our property taxes, our growth rate is usually about 0.5%. So our property taxes grow by 3.5%. AV always grows by 3%. Okay, not always, but should, unless there's...
Unless real market value drops below assessed value.
Yes.
Which for most of the residential properties in Lake Oswego, real market value is, assessed value is about 40% of real market value. So it would have, the economy, home prices would have to drop a lot. It's usually closer together for commercial and industrial properties. There's not as big a gap.
Yeah.
But a huge portion of our property tax revenues are residential property.
Yeah, and so back in 2012, 2013, 2014, there was all kinds of compression because of that throughout the state of Oregon. Lake Oswego, our real market value came to 84%, our maximum assessed value. So we never felt that same compression that everyone else did. The worst growth we had, as I got here in 2010, in the middle of that, so I think it was 2.9%. Was the worst growth that we had on our AV. So our property taxes are even strong, even when the housing is going sideways. Side note, I guess. And here, if you trend with the actual back then from the 2014 number, that's the trend line that we would have had at 3%. Our revenues have been growing actually quite a bit more in the last few years. This little bump here was just 1 year where we got some extra money and delinquent property taxes from Comcast. They had a utility. There was a lawsuit and everything about it, and so we didn't get their property taxes for about 10 years. Nobody did, and then it paid out, and so we got an extra $1 million that year. So that's what that little bump is there. But here's the one that everyone wants to see. So here's, instead of just seeing the final year, here we can kind of see year 1 through year 6. So this is 2025, that's 2030. You can kind of see the blue one represents the revenues and the expenditures. This big sharp that comes up here, this is when that new PERS rate that I plugged in there comes in. So it's not just you're based on the COLA or inflation, it's based on there's a higher rate on top of the COLA that hits it. And then it kind of comes down a little bit as it's the same rate, and then it jumps up again, and then goes down, and then it jumps up again in that last year. The one thing to note here is we are starting to get closer here. The one thing that isn't in this is sometime in about right here, this blue line will probably bump up a little bit because the East End Urban Rural District should close, or if it doesn't close, it will quit taking TIF because it'll have enough TIF to pay off its debt, even though if the projects aren't done, so it might stay open, but we won't be taking more TIF. So all of the overlapping districts in the urban renewal area at that point will get their portion. So the school district will get their portion, the county will get their portion, and the city will get their portion. Our portion is about $2 million a year. So that's the good news that isn't actually in here. So again, our general fund revenues are quite stable. You already saw this, so I don't need to talk about this again. I guess the one thing that Martha didn't point out, though, is this is actually to scale, that this is the total revenues that the general fund brings in compared to if you go up and down, the amount that police. And so this side is the monies that each of these departments are bringing in. And then as these the non-departmental general fund revenues, hotel, motel, property taxes, state share revenues, that kind of stuff. As that comes in, it gets smaller. So you can kind of see, like she was talking about this, but so like police, they bring in, what is it? I think it's about a little over $1 million a year in 911 locom, for Milwaukee and Westland and, in part. But you can kind of see where streets gets the majority of their money. They do get that $2 to $3 million from the street fund every year. And the library has the library district money, but unlike any other city, like Oswego actually does, they like their library more, I guess, and they give more money than just the library district money. I guess that wasn't nice to say.
Yeah.
Being sarcastic, sorry.
No, it's all right.
Then to go back here, I guess, is there anything that anyone would like to see, or you want me to move the numbers a little bit, change it up, or what about you, Ally?
Counselor Ali, Afghan, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Director Cross, 2 years ago, we went through this process and we made some assumptions on these numbers, on the inflation, state shared, and those kind of things. I realize you may not have this answer right now. What were our assumptions and how are we trending against those assumptions?
Okay, so our assumptions last time, I left it at the medium, this 4, which brings it right here to 3%. And what it's saying is it's 3% on an average of 6 years, not 3%. So as you can remember in November when I did the master fees and charges, the one thing I did always show is what the 10-year trend is for CPI. And even though we had the 6.6 and 8, when you took the other 8 years into account, it still was just under 3%. And it was like, yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Or anything more, Finance Manager Cross?
Just here for questions.
Okay, not hearing anything. Thank you very much. And we will now be talking about the municipal grants review process and the subcommittee selection. So, Mr. Bruner.
All right. Good evening, Chair Zeller, Mayor Buck, and members of the Budget Committee. My name is Quinn Bruner, and I'm an analyst in the City Manager's Office. I'm joining you tonight to facilitate the creation of the Municipal Grant Subcommittee and to share a high-level overview of our new process for managing the city's grant programs. So following a year-long review and restructuring of how the city funds our community partners, we've expanded the scope of the Municipal Grant Subcommittee to include 2 primary functions. So these are an annual review of the city's grant landscape along with the selection of recipients for 2 specific grant programs. Now, this first bucket, the annual review, this is to ensure that programs are aligned with council priorities, that they are properly resourced to advance council priorities, and that they have consistent evaluation criteria so that we're managing our relationships with community partners the same way no matter which program we're funding them through. This also includes a joint annual impact report to council so you can see the full extent to which that the resources we're allocating through this mechanism is touching the lives of our community members. This year, we have brought 4 grant programs under this unified umbrella. They include one related to historic resources, a second related to emergency preparedness, a third related to social service organizations, and a fourth for one-off community events and projects. So the Municipal Grant Subcommittee has historically managed a single grant focused on social service organizations and small dollar projects and events, and we parsed those 2 out. So the Municipal Grant Subcommittee will now manage 2 programs so that those priorities are not competing with one another. So I'm planning to leave this overview of the landscape here pretty high level, and I'll go into depth with members of the subcommittee, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you have if you want to dive deeper in this setting.
I would just, having been on the Municipal Grants Subcommittee a couple of years, really applaud the work that's been doing to clarify both the criteria, to make it more broad, and then to separate out the grants. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Zeller. So before I move on to membership, I am also required by code to report that the creation of this subcommittee is projected to have a small fiscal impact, that being less than $2,500. So I know you're going to be operating at a different scale for the rest of your time here, but I just need to tell you that. It all is attributable to administration and staffing, which will be absorbed by our existing city manager's office budget, but putting that on your radar. Membership-wise, the subcommittee consists of 2 councilors and 2 appointed budget committee members serving 1-year terms. I've coordinated with both Mayor Buck and Chair Zeller, who I believe are prepared to nominate members for this year's appointments.
Yes. Yes, I would like to nominate Councilor Afghan and Councilor Corrigan, the council.
And I want to thank, we had quite a bit of interest in this subcommittee, so really want to thank everybody who volunteered to serve on this subcommittee. And it is my pleasure to nominate Ms. Rye and Mr. Allander.
Terrific. Now, I just need a motion to create the Municipal Grant Subcommittee and appoint Councilor Afghan, Councilor Corrigan, Ms. Rye, and Mr. Allander to terms that extend through December 31st, 2025.
I move to create a standing subcommittee of the Budget Committee with members Afghan, Corrigan, Rye, and Allander, serving terms through December 31st, 2025. Do I hear a second? Thank you, Councilor Wendland. Any discussion?
I would like to volunteer for this.
Good. I'm so glad, as you've been nominated. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
With that, thank you, everybody. And that does bring us to the end of tonight's agenda. Our next meeting is April 23rd, 6 to 9 p.m. And as a reminder, the budget will be delivered to you 1 week in advance. So it makes for good reading early and often. And with that, the meeting of the Lake Oswego Budget Committee is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
I know.